Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Coroner. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we start off with Jenny. We finally get to know what Liam's letter said. Obviously, him apologizing for it being so long, but obviously, he went into a place for vets to get help, and he's been getting help, and he's actually, still loves Jenny, and he would want to meet with her if she decided that she wanted to meet him in return. And now for Jenny, it is a conversation of trying to figure out what she wants to do. And I thought was so interesting because when she's talking to her therapist, she just assumed when her and Liam said goodbye, because she's like, I said I love you, he said I'm sorry, and then we said goodbye, and she just assumed that it was over, because she's even saying that on some level, what else was I supposed to think? And he was like, there's no expiration date on love. And she's like, but what's inside of me that made me immediately think, I didn't think oh, maybe he'll come back or whatever. It was I immediately assumed it was over. And he was saying that basically that gut feelings are usually a byproduct of something. In this particular case, trauma. It's have you ever had anyone leave in your life? And she's like, well, my sister died, so there's that. But it's yes. But then your mom, there's the whole thing with your mom. And she's like, does that cause you any issues? And she's like, no. And he was like, the immediate, that kind of saying no to stuff like that kind of implies that it's kind of a defense mechanism to there is something there. So it's she kind of has abandonment issues where she assumes when someone kind of leaves her life, they're gone, they're never coming back, because her mom never came back into her life, which I'm wondering, is there going to be anything circulating with that in this season? Obviously, a lot of Jenny's story has been about confronting a lot of the issues that have been buried underneath, a lot of personal stuff that she's kind of blocked away and hasn't really dealt with. So I'm curious to see if anything with her mom ends up playing a role in this. But obviously, her therapist is right, going forward for the rest of the week, I want you to say yes to a lot of stuff. So I was like, oh, this is very yes man of you. So obviously this case she ends up having to work on. There's two cases at play here. One is a guy named Andrew who ran out into traffic and got hit by a car. I thought that was related to the other case about the woman Shirley, which it didn't seem like there were any discerning means of how she died. But it turns out when they look into it, she overdosed on pills. She killed herself. So this all deals with some kind of retreat known as the Turning Tides or something like that. And obviously, as Jenny finds out, this place isn't what it kind of... It's unclear. I'm curious, is this Turning Tides place going to be the foundation of the season? Because once again, every season has, an overarching story. And I don't know. I feel like there's... Maybe we won't. It just feels like there's some unresolved stuff with this. Because Shirley isn't the first suicide associated with this place. A dude shows up and he was talking about I think it was his son Jonah, who had my son came here, my son left here worse than he came here. And it's the moment he came back home, a month after coming back home, he jumped off a bridge and killed himself. So, and the lady who runs the place, Faye, is suggesting they have because she was saying what's AA have a 5 to 10% success rate, whereas Turning Tide has an 85, but it's still kind of some people, I get it, but I'm also that still speaks volumes. Nothing's ever foolproof, but I'm still but what about that 15%? I think it's one thing if the 15% this isn't for me and leave. It's another when they leave and end up dying in the process, because it seems like she has a very way of handling things, because Jenny sits on in one of those, and the way she kind of goes at Tina and be because Tina has her trauma involves her mom being very verbally abusive to her, breaking her spirit, and the whole point was Faye was kind of talking down to her, kind of almost doing that verbal abuse as well, not the same, but it was for Jenny it was well, you're just re-traumatizing her. So it makes you wonder, is that her way to do that? Is her way to save people is to re-traumatize them? Because that is that's how you fight back. That's how you gain back some control. But at the end of it, Tina was yeah, you're right. My life is my life. I can't let my mom, whatever my issues toward my, I can't let my feelings towards her keep boggling me down. It's not her life. She's not the one to control this. It's my life. I've got to take back control of it. But then later on, you see Tina take a phone that she had hidden, which immediately it's well, that could just be well, I thought of that as like, maybe it's not as foolproof of a problem, but it could just be like, no, like I'm probably calling someone to tell them like, yeah, like everything's great. Like maybe like her issues were aside from her mom, so maybe she was calling her mom to be like, everything's good now between them. I don't know. I thought of it as kind of weird that, but it's like, no, it's just the rules are you're not supposed to have a phone, so you're keeping it low key. But I'm like, I'm still kind of, because that led Jenny to kind of look into the whole, kind of blanking on it. Cheryl situation, which I didn't go into it. You immediately kind of felt a little off about this place the moment you find out from Cheryl's husband. And it's like, yeah, he's like, at least I thought we were getting better. But then she, like, one day, like 3 days ago, called me up about a divorce and then took $10,000 out of the bank account. I'm like, that sounds like a cult type of thing of like, oh. But then, like, Faye was saying, like, we only take a one payment. We don't, like, ask you for payment later. It's like, we take the initial sum first, then like it's never like an additional fees and stuff like that. So I was like, is Faye lying? I was like, where did that 10,000 go then? And so we find out what it was. Cheryl at the retreat ended up falling in love with someone. It seemed like it was that dude Fareed, I think was his name. But it turns out, like, he's like, yeah, she came to me and was like, hey, all the conversations we had, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. That night in the maze before she died was, like, the first time we'd ever talk. I was like, since she had been here, I'm like, so someone was pretending to be you? Like, were they afraid to, like, be them real self? Because I thought, like, they were communicating through her phone or something like that, like, through text. So she assumed it was him, but it was like, no, like, it's... But it's like, no, it was kind of that vein, but it was through the VIDS, and it was Oliver. And they connected, and that's actually what led to the tragedy of everything, because both of them, like in particular, that place puts you in a vulnerable state, and yes, she had bloomed, you know, because that being the whole conversation of kind of finding your way. God, what was it that dude had said? Kind of described like blooming, which I think hearing it made Jenny kind of peek up a little bit, because I love the whole reason why she ended up partaking in like and watching like the whole thing with Tina was because she was like no, but then she was like, damn it, my therapist, yes, you know, she kind of had to say yes to stuff. So I thought that was interesting, but it like Cheryl was in such a vulnerable place, and her and Oliver connected, and you know, he never told her who he really was, because I think he kept it anonymous for his own sake of just like, no, like, because in his mind it was like, no, it was meant to be fun, it wasn't meant to be anything. But for Shirley, it meant everything. Like she poured her heart out, she opened up to him about everything, you know, left her husband for him, drew $10,000 because he was like, oh, let's go to Hawaii. Like, he's the one that suggested it, because she was like, oh, I've never really been. He's like, oh, let's go to Hawaii and stuff like that. For him, it was kind of a fantasy. It was kind of an escape for him, because his mom is Faye. She runs the place, and it's like, I think this operation is supposed to eventually be his, but you know, it's just for him. He used Shirley as a means of escape, but it wasn't escape for her, but so much more. It could be like the next stage in her life, or like for the first time, like she was unhappy for so long, because the whole conversation was, can you like being with someone who only sees you the way they see you and not for who you really are, which they bonded over that, because he was like, yeah, my mom only sees me as kind of like her son that's going to take over this place, even though he has no interest in it. But because of that, like, Shirley was in a very vulnerable state, like, her entire life. She's like, I literally turned my life upside down for you. And he was like, this is over. And she killed herself because of it, you know? So is anyone necessarily at fault? It's a combination of many different things. But it's also got to riddle you with, like, right, I am partially responsible, you know? It's like, it is kind of sad to know that, like, him saying, like, it wasn't real. Like, that means once again, it was just an escape for you. It was just meant to be fun. It, you know, it's just, you know, someone you could vent to and stuff like that. But then he even said, like, right, when it started getting personal, I should have known that was an issue. Like, because it was meant to just probably be something casual, like, oh, we vent our issues and stuff like that. But then when it got too personal, it's like, yeah, that's when, like, those lines, I mean, because the nature of that place is to kind of, like, shoulder your, like, not shoulder, but kind of express your vulnerabilities, to open up about it. So it's not the best place to, like, you know, she found someone to kind of hold on to, like, while she was in such a vulnerable state. And, you know, it's heartbreaking that things played out that way, you know. And what's the byproduct of that? Like, that's really all we got was that confession at the end, because at the end of the day, he didn't do anything. Like, it's just a sad thing, like, he can't be charged for it. It's not like he did anything wrong necessarily. Like, he might have broken her heart and she killed herself in the process, but I don't think there's anything legally like that he necessarily did wrong. I don't think it's not like he, like, it's not a thing of like, oh, he intentionally like told her to kill herself or something. It's like, no. So whether that facility will suffer any ramifications for that, I don't know. But it does seem like I could definitely see that place being a main overarching story, like the Kelly thing from season 1. Like, maybe it will be a little while before we really fully circle back to it. I mean, because I wasn't expecting like the Kelly story. Like, I figured, I knew at one point, like, yeah, that Kelly thing is going to take a dark turn. But there was like so many other intricacies connected to it, like the other side of storylines connected to it, that like maybe we'll see something of that vein. I'm curious, is Jenny going to come back here? Because it's like, right, she saw firsthand what this place can do for people, and maybe she might think it could be helpful, but maybe that causes issues in its own right, or maybe because of the way this case ended up falling, the fallout, like how this case ended, maybe that'll make her be determined not to even go here, or maybe even wanting the place to kind of potentially get shut. I don't know. But it definitely feels like this could be, or maybe, because things are just so unresolved. I mean, I think that's just the sad nature of the situation for it to play out like that and be so unresolved. But I could definitely see that being once again, like, the entire season's already done. It's just obviously airing out over the course of these next few weeks on the CW. But I'm really, I don't want to know. Obviously, I don't want to spoil myself, but I am curious to find out if this is going to be an overarching story thing, or was this just a one episode thing. But like I was bringing up earlier, I thought it was going to tie into the whole Andrew thing, but it was like, no, turns out that was an unrelated thing. Because like him, like getting off his bike and running, I thought like something inside of him got spurred on because of that place. Like, I thought it did something to him. Like I said, I felt like this place was a little like culty or something like that, which still could be the case. But because like I said, once again, like that dude, that father saying like his son committed suicide, like there might be other instances of it. Like, sure, the way it seems like at very least Shirley and was it Jonah are like the only cases that at least Jenny's aware of. So I don't know if there's going to end up being a darker history or connection to that place. But other than that, McAvoy Donovan is investigating this case, and obviously they visit that dude early on. And I guess I was like, that's weird. He was like, the way he was like, yeah, he looked, it's like, oh, he had a mask on. He looked Asian. I'm like, I guess I was like, you said that with a little disdain in your voice, but it didn't even correlate in my head to think about it until later on when it's like he showed up and he didn't have a mask, and he didn't like the guy, because he's the one because they found out when Jenny examined him that he had like defensive wound on his hand, like he had been cut by a knife. And it turns out he was chased into traffic by that dude because the dude, and he did have like a Canadian flag. I was like, is that supposed to be a little like Confederacy, like in the context? That's why I was like, I don't know. I don't know if Canada has that same like situation that the U.S. does. I'm not well versed in all like the intricacies of like Canada's situation, but I don't know if that's, like I said, just like his flag being out there in the window, I was like, oh, I mean, it's a Canadian flag, but it isn't, like I said, it's not the same thing as like the Confederate flag thing necessarily. So I'm like, I didn't know whether I was like, I'm probably reading too much into that, but it's like, it's because of the anti-Asian sentiment that was going on. I mean, especially at the time of like these episodes being filmed. I was like, because like I said, like he said it with such disdain, but I can't believe it didn't immediately come to my mind. Like, right, because he was like, basically, it was like, oh, you came here without a mask. I think he had a mask, but it was like pulled down when he was delivering the food. The guy was just looking for an excuse because he was basically like, oh, you brought this here, like you people spreading your virus. I was like, the Asian hate, dude. I was like, damn, dude. I guess I just wasn't, it legitimately didn't cross my mind. It obviously should have, but it's sad. And how nonchalant the dude was, like, oh yeah, I'm the reason why the guy died, because he ran into traffic trying to get away from me because I was literally chasing him. And he was just like, well, could you leave? Bye. Blah, blah, blah. Like, he was no help because, like, oh, he knew it'd come back to bite him. But, like, you showed no remorse in any shape or form. So, I don't know, man. And even later on, talking to that, was it Andrew's son? And it's like, he's like, you get justice for your dad, but for him, it's like, my dad, he's like, I didn't even know my dad was working delivery and stuff like that. My dad was 65. He should have been able to retire. Who cares about, like, I think he was going like the medical school or something like that. He's like, nothing mattered. Like, my dad worked 65 years, like 65 years old just to end up dead by some like racist, you know? And it just, there's like, how is that fair? Like, you know, it's like, right, like he just becomes like another victim as a part of all of this. Like, and that actually spurs Donovan a little bit on, because his dad wants to go on a little bit of a cruise, and like, no, not a cruise, but he wants to go be a part of something with the new lady in his life. But Donovan's kind of hesitant, because it's like, no, like with everything going on, you're like in your 70s, like I want you to be okay. I want you to, you know, basically with everything going on, I don't want you to kind of be in a position where you could end up getting sick at your age. But for him, it's like, if it's not the pandemic, it's going to be something else. There's always going to be, he's like, I'm not going to let anything stop me from living my life. Like I'm too old at this point. And it's just like, I found that you know, his second win, I guess, borrowing a phrase for someone else. Isn't that what Bonnie says? Bonnie, your second wind? I think that's what she calls it. I'm blinking on it right now. Regardless, tangents and all that aside. But Donovan's trying to be, I guess, because also the case, but also everything he's going through, which I'm actually surprised he didn't open up to, because it's like, oh, the doctor, well, could we find out about Donovan's medical condition? So it turns out he has like a tumor, that's what the pain, luckily they found it early enough, but he's going to have to go through chemo, and it's like, am I going to be able to work? It's like, yeah, like, I mean, you know, there might be some side effects of fatigue and stuff like that, but it also depends on like if you feel well enough. But you know, the first, you know, radiation treatment, we're going to need someone to come pick you up, because we don't know what you know, what you're going to be like afterwards. Like, so we have to test it first to see like how your body responds to it. And so he doesn't tell anyone, because Malik the entire episode is like, oh, what's up with you? He's like, oh, I'm going to go to this thing on Thursday. Oh, your Thursdays are booked? Because at first he was like, oh, like, is there a new lady in your life? And it's like, are you going to like, I think he was saying like I think Donovan was like some yoga class or something. And then he was like, oh, those hips don't lie, or something like that. But Donovan isn't really good at opening up about his personal life. You know, you know, because he went to his sister's wedding last season, so I'm like, I'm sure he hasn't told him, he didn't tell his dad, didn't tell his sister. But I thought if anyone, he was going to get Jenny, because they're pretty tight-knit. I thought like he was going to get Jenny to be the one to drive him. But we never actually got to see who it was he had, we never actually got to see who it was that actually, went to, who was going to be the one to pick him up or whatever. So I'm curious, like, did he just handle that on his own? Did he get like a ride sharing or something, or did he talk to someone else? Like, the fact that they didn't really show you makes me wonder. But other than that, we touch on, like I brought up earlier, we do touch on the Liam side of things, because we see kind of his therapy kind of continuing as he's kind of taking care of horses. It's like, because I guess by taking care of the horses, it means he's kind of, the horses, I guess, kind of resonate with like your presence. And, you know, if you're a little off, they're not going to respond well to you. So there's one particular horse that he's trying hard with, but it's not working. But it's like, all right, steps at a time. And one of the ladies working there is kind of like, oh, maybe you should find a different horse, which part of me was wondering, is the horse situation supposed to be a metaphor? Because it's like, right, sometimes it's just not a right fit. Like, you find a different horse, and because I think maybe on some level it's supposed to be a metaphor with the old Jenny thing of like, right, stay with the same horse, stay with the same person. Like, I might have my issues, but maybe, or, you know, maybe this is the right fit, or am I just trying too hard to make this fit when in actuality it's not the right fit? And the moment that they had that conversation, I was like, oh, please don't sleep with her. Please don't sleep to her. And then cut to the ending where she sleeps with him, and then like they sleep together, and then it's like, oh, cool. He gets a message from Jenny saying yes. You're like, oh, cool. So the thing is, have things changed for him? Like, has he thought like maybe him and Jenny aren't a right fit for each other, which is such a shame, because she is the one that says I love you, and you kind of, I mean, you had every right to leave because you needed to fix yourself. You weren't in the right good headspace, you weren't in the right state of mind, but also it's just, I'm so curious to see how that plays out, because it's kind of like oh, who's that a text from? It's like, oh, Jenny, because she knows about Jenny, because they had talked about it earlier on. So because she'd even suggested like, oh, when your therapy is up here, why don't you stick around? We need more hands to kind of take care of things here. And I was like, oh, dude, that's more likely something was going to happen between them. And I'm like, I mean, it is what it is. It's not like him and Jenny are actually together right now, so they walk, so it's not like it, but it's still kind of probably is going to be a thing of, probably when they do meet up, it's going to be a thing of, right, like, is this a right fit is it right for me? Is it right for her? It's going to be sad, I don't know. I just don't think it probably is going to work out happily. I mean, maybe it will, I'm just, I'm the romantic that I am. So I wanted things to work out between them, but maybe, maybe it's just, it wasn't a right fit. So we'll have to wait and see ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about today. Next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.